Welcome to another episode of the Between Podcast, and this is a special episode, everybody. You tuned in. You've been waiting for this episode. You've been on the edge of your seats. We've been getting thousands and thousands of emails saying, when will this episode come out? Well, folks, the wait is over. Good news. The Reverend Danny Hillier and I are here to bring to a conclusion this series that the Between Podcast has been exploring over the last few months. Well, no, I guess maybe 6 months now. Honestly, if I'm honest about how long it's taken Danny for us to answer 10 questions, we built this. It was like what's an easy series of podcasts we could do? And we were like, let's just ask big questions. I think that was probably our posture. Like, this will be fun. Just ask a big faith question and talk about it. Well, we have dived deeply into at least 9 episodes so far of just taking a big old hard question and seeing if we could make any sense of it together. I doubt that we have. Danny, I'm curious, as you look back over this series so far, this series of big faith questions, what's your reflection on it? How you feeling? Do you think we nailed it? Do you think we've answered them all?
100%. No. Honestly, I've loved the time of reflecting on these questions. And most of the time, sometimes I even go away from the conversation. I'm like, man, is that like what I believe? Like, where is that coming from? Analyzing my own faith journey throughout these questions, which I hope the listener as well has taken time to analyze themselves, to turn inward and be like, man, I haven't asked myself that question in a long time, or I used to say this was my response, but over time my response has kind of shifted. At the church I work at, we just finished up a confirmation class with a bunch of 8th graders and 10th graders. It's a class that we go through where we ask these big questions, right? And talk about fun. Like, as an adult, these questions are fun. They're even more fun to ask to teenagers who are just not afraid to say it as it is, not afraid to ask even bigger questions that us adults are like, whoa, you just asked that out loud kind of thing. But I do think that this has been a fruitful season of just asking these questions and encouraging other people that it's healthy to ask these questions. It's healthy to wrestle with these questions. And it's even healthier not to have the answer to these questions.
Yeah, I think the permission that I think we've given, I hope people have received by our example, is to not really know. I mean, like the at the end of every episode, we're kind of like, I don't know if that was even close, but it was really this. I agree. This has been really powerful for me, like just to have these conversations. These are all questions I'm not even sure I knew I had, or I wouldn't have made this list of these are my burning questions. They were just kind of questions that we generated, and we're like, oh man, that sounds like a fun one to tackle. And typically, listeners, you probably do know this if you've listened to any of them, but like it's not like we come in with an outline and a clear answer to any of these. This is often Danny and I starting with a prompt and then just seeing where the sacred space between us guides us and seeing where we end up. And it's been there have been times, I think, Danny, when you and I have left these conversations and been like, oh, I think I discovered something there in the conversation. There
Yeah.
have been other times when I've been like, I'm not even sure if what I said is what I believe now. And we just finished recording. We haven't even published it yet. Like there is, I hope listeners have permission, feel permission to explore and to wonder out loud and find people like this that they can wonder out loud with and explore with. And I think what I hope anyway is that this process starts to reveal some truth, something that feels true to you. And I think, Danny, that's maybe one of the ways to describe the heart of the topic we're here to talk about today, which is kind of like, well, what is that truth that we're chasing? What is that ultimate capital T truth that is underneath all of this stuff? How do we know when we're bumping up against that truth? Another way that I might frame this entire podcast recording session, Danny, is just what's the point? Like, what's the point of this whole faith thing, this whole
Mhm.
spiritual journey thing that we could say church or our own faith life or our own spiritual journey? But what's the point? Like what is it for? Um, is it about discovering that truth and knowing that truth for sure? Is it about something else? I don't know. That to me feels like where this whole podcast series has probably been funneling us to, and also what we've probably been avoiding trying to talk about for the last 9 or so episodes, because those are pretty heavy questions. Let's start with truth, Danny. Do you have
Mm.
even when you hear that word truth? I'm guessing there's baggage for you around the word truth, or you've got some immediate uh, emotional response or physical response to it. I'm curious.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Matt, there's so much. And here's the thing also. These two questions that we are considering as we tie this maybe crooked bow on this entire podcast series is uh these are usually like those existential in the dark on your face questions of what's truth and what's the point. And maybe somebody listening today is at that point, and I hope that this gives you, you know, some encouragement, some permission, and more importantly, that these questions are not only for the existential moments of life, but for everyday life, right? We don't have to be, because sometimes I think we hear questions like this, and I'll consider that later. And then when you're in the valley of darkness, you consider those questions. And maybe it's also important to consider these questions when we're in a more upright posture before we even get there, so that we have at least something to pull ourselves out of the darkness with. Anyways, that's on my mind before we even uh, dive into these questions.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. The discovering truth before I have to feels like a good strategy. Figuring out what's the point before it's too late feels important. But you're right. You know, it's when we're laying face down in the dirt that, you know, we close our eyes sometimes and just sort of shake our head and say, what is the point? What even is, what am I even chasing? What is even real right now?
yeah.
Well, like when everything hurts and it feels like everything's falling apart, it's, it's sometimes hard to even believe that there's something in the middle of it all, some big pillar that is real and eternal and beyond the moment of pain that we might be feeling. I think that actually, Danny, I think that's a really important thing to name.
Hmm. And so I have so many thoughts around truth. And I think more often than not, especially in faith communities, I speak specifically coming from a Christian faith, uh, that people use truth as a control to uncertainty, right? It's there's so much uncertainty in life. And we are controlling beings. Man, I will be the first one to raise my hand and say, I love to be in control. And when we are feeling out of control, or life is feeling chaotic and out of control, we feel the need to find the control somewhere. And more often than not, right, that comes in forms of religion. And then we name that control as truth.
So the truth, yeah, truth is often conflated with rules or um, clarity, certain policies.
Yeah, policy is a good one.
That's real, right? Like I think a lot of people when they think of truth, their gut reaction is to go to what are the policies I've been taught. And a lot of times those policies are unconscious, right? They are policies of they're policies of these are the right kind of people and these are the wrong kind of people, but I would never say it out loud. They are
Mm,
policies of um, people should behave in such a way. And if they don't, then they're disconnected from truth. Um, certainly policies of, if it's written in the Bible, then it must be true, which, as students of the Bible, I'll just speak for myself. No, that's not actually the case at all. In fact, a lot of the Bible is not lies. That's understand that it's not A or B. A lot of the Bible is expression and poetry and wondering and irony and trying to teach a lesson upside down and trying to confront powers that be, and even the audiences of the time and even the audiences of now, confronting us with stark challenges that undermine our patterns of everyday behavior. Like, no, that it's not a book of true lines that are all numbered, and so you just pick one and you'll find a piece of truth. I cannot believe that's the case. It does reveal truth, I believe. I do think it points to truth. I think it invites us to walk and bump directly into truth and feel how we feel next to truth. I think all those things are true, but anyway, policies, written, the scripture truth, I think those are different from what I have discovered and am discovering, to be clear, am actively discovering every day in my own faith journey.
Yeah. I think you just named something so important too, that the opposite of truth isn't lies, right? Like when you say, like, the Bible is the truth, it's not the opposite saying the Bible is a bunch of lies. It's no, was it ever meant to be policy, right? Was it ever meant to be, we are a people of law and order and control, and so it feels good to assign a holy, sacred text as, oh, this must be policy, this must be order, this must be that truth. And it's actually like, it's truth, but not in the way of do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. You're right. And I think that has been used and abused in so many different ways since it was written.
Yeah. Okay. So Danny, how do you find truth? Where is it?
Man, yeah. So there's so many. I actually liked how you said, I don't know if you said it before we started recording or when we're recording, but like the capital T truth, right? It made me start thinking of, okay, what are the lowercase truths of life, right? Like we have big T traumas that a therapist will tell you about, and we got little T traumas that make up our life. So we have like big truths of who we are, who were created to be, who I name as God, who is the universe, is created all things. And then we have like the little T truths in our lives of like, yeah, this happened to me, or this is a part of my story, kind of thing. But man, we can get so in our own heads of truth, in the fact of, if my story's truth, so their story must be a lie, right? When in reality, there's always the three truths that are usually discussed in marriage counseling. There's, this spouse's truth of how they're feeling, how they're interpreting what they're going through. There's this spouse's truth of their side of that same story. And then there's the objective truth of like what's going on. But that doesn't make either spouse's truths a lie. It's still what's they're experiencing.
Danny, this is nerdy, but I'm taking a class right now on church history, and we're currently in scholastic theologians. So we are in the Middle Ages that I'm studying, folks. Yeah, it's riveting. Anyway, we're studying. I mean, think the year 1100 is where we are, somewhere in there, and there's this character emerges in Europe in the Middle Ages as universities, sort of the seeds of modern universities are starting to be planted. And some of these around Europe, there are these thinkers that are starting to look at the first 1,000 years of the early church, first 1,000 years of Christianity. And it's been messy, right? Like this is before the printing press. It's messy. It's wars and oral stories, a little bit of written tradition. It's tribal. It's moving, and it's messy. It's just messy, and mixed into that the Middle Ages, right? Like it's just so messy. And so there are these scholastic theologians, these people sort of coming together to try to, for the first time, sort of make sense of all of it, and to put scaffolding and to name truth, to say, let's take all these disparate voices from the first 1,000 years of Christianity, and let me show you how they all are actually saying the same thing. Trust me, my scaffolding of a systematic theology is the answer. And then there's this character named Peter Abelard who shows up in France. It starts teaching at a university, and he starts naming the tension between all the voices in the early church, and especially the tension between scripture stories, between gospel stories, and the tension between the early church fathers' interpretation of those gospel stories. And so he writes a book eventually, long story. He has an affair with this woman, Heloise. And anyway, it's a dark story. You guys, it ends in castration. I'm not going to get into that. It's a crazy story, but Peter Abelard ends up writing this book that he titles Sic et Non in Latin, which means yes and no, where he essentially lines up. I haven't read this book, but I just read about the book. But it sounds like the book is basically lining up. Here's a statement from an early church father. Here's another statement from a different early church father. And they are the opposite thing. They claim opposite truths. Let me give you another one and another one and another one. And he builds an entire book called Yes and No about the discrepancy between the way we understand Jesus and the Christian story, and publishes this whole book called Sic et Non, Yes and No. And I didn't know anything about Peter Abelard, but now he's like my favorite person in the world.
Aside from
things got dark, but anyway, one part of his story,
not your role model,
not my role model, not where I'm heading. Just a fascinating character. But as we talk about truth, I can't help but want to pull from the spirit of this guy from 1100 and say, yeah, in the tension is where the truth lies. In the tension is where truth is revealed. Actually, if we want it to be comfortable, if we want a simple, easy truth, we're going to find something less than that. But it's only in the pull of opposite ideas, and in the pull of discussion, and in the pull of discourse, only in that pull of curiosity and uncertainty does truth actually get revealed. That's my quote, not Peter Abelard. So if you're writing that down, it's Matt Matson with 2 T's. What do you think, Danny?
Wow. Now when people Google Peter Abelard, they're going to see Matt Matson comes up second to that, which can be a slippery slope for you, Matt.
That's it's like Michael Scott, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
Yeah.
That's good.
Wow. I do love that. Yes and no. What if that was our response? And it goes back to that what we assign truth for the sake of control of uncertainty, because we'd rather it just be yes or just be no. And in the reality, a lot of the Bible, a lot of ancient scripture, a lot of anything you read is yes and no. Uh, for those listening and tuning in that are kind of like mind blown by, or maybe tuned out of Matt's little nerd out moment there, because they're like,
That's
that's
fair.
way above what I'm studying right now. It made me think of, here's a practical story. It happened to me. I was walking the other day, and I usually listen to a podcast, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna take my headphones out. I'm just gonna walk, and I just need to think. And I came across these two boys, and they were playing. They were playing in the gutters of the street. You know, it was like normal third grade boy things, I guess. So then I was like, oh, be careful. And they're like, we're trying to figure out where this leads to, and like, I was just like, I just want to make sure you're safe. Anyways, then this young boy, you know, just starts talking to me, and he starts telling me the story of he's like, yeah, I shot a moose one time. I was like, whoa, like, that's crazy. He's like, I had to shoot it 14 times. He goes, but then it unzipped itself and it was a human. And then like he starts going in, and I was like having a moment of like, oh my God, like what is wrong? Like, is this child okay?
Yeah.
And he's going into this big, like gigantic story. And you could tell his friend is even standing there with a stick, like, whoa. And then he's like, the police were all there, blah, blah. And he goes, and I was like, was this a dream? He's like, yes, I've had the same dream since I was 4 years old.
What
But
in the world?
so I know. So, and anyways, I say all of that because in that moment, I was having my mom brain and my pastor brain were like in conversation of like, okay, I'm not going to tell that kid that it didn't happen, because clearly it's happening in his subconscious every night. And how do I help him like reconcile like real life and dream life, right? But that helps me with the yes and no,
Mm,
right? Of because we have dreams. And I think dreams can be profound and prophetic and sometimes harmful and
yeah.
wackadoodle. And so our dreams are the perfect example of yes and no. Of
Wow.
man, my subconscious does feel troubled by something. And no, that actually didn't happen. I did
Yeah.
not shoot a moose that was actually a human being and police showed, right? Like, but all of that to say, your Peter Abelard and what he's getting at is, I think, how we experience our subconscious and our real life. I mean, even the stories we tell ourselves of, right? Like I do that all the time. I leave an interaction with someone and I immediately start storytelling about that
Yeah.
interaction, to the point that you're like, oh, that okay, Danny, you're getting away from the truth of what happened in that actual scenario, right? Like go back to the scenario, let it be what it was. But my subconscious wants to dramatize it or do something else to it that feels necessary for my own sake. So that's that tension of the yes and no.
Man, I can't help but think about the doubting Thomas story, and Thomas is like,
Hmm.
wait, is this real? And like
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder if he was like yes and no. Like even in that moment, even he touches Jesus' side. Like I know I'm a good doctrinal Christian would be like, no, of course it was real. But I can't help but wonder if he was just like, I yes and no. Like I cannot,
Hmm.
I can't believe, I don't have the capacity to believe this. I don't have the
Hmm.
capacity to comprehend this. Yes and no. I feel like my faith is a yes and no faith, Danny, and I'm okay.
Hmm.
I'm not okay. I'm proud to share that with people. I don't think that's a bad thing. If people ask, do you believe in the resurrection? Yes and no, and I don't know what I mean. Like don't like I I don't have like a and let me present my argument. No, I'm just saying yes and
Hmm.
no, and I don't know. Like it's so mysterious. I can't put my hands around it. And if believing means I have to be able to put my hands around it and put it in my pocket and present it back to you in a clear, rational way, I can't do that. So no. If
Yeah.
believing means that I can walk in the mystery of it, even though I can't put my hands around it, and I can allow it to be a part of me, and I can try to match its rhythm. I can try to understand its pace. I can try to feel the love that the idea is made out of. And then maybe that's what believing is.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes and no is my answer to that question in a very, very real way. And um I think that's okay.
Mhm.
I think that's okay.
I think it's more than okay because I think where religion can be problematic is when people are only a yes or only a no. I don't think you can look at scripture. I don't think you can look at faith as such black and white contrast of like yes and no, as this is truth and as this is lies, because it's so much more complex in this human experience that we're having right now. So I'm like currently trying to like get my thoughts back on track because you can spiral so quickly down like, oh my gosh, yeah, what well then what does this mean? Like what is it? You know? It's kind of like my response, your response with the resurrection is my response as we had a few episodes ago of like of hell, right? I of yes and no. Like no, I don't believe it in the way that some people might believe it. Kind of like evil. Yes, I have firsthand witnessed evil. And no, I don't believe in this red figure with a pitchfork and fire all around that we name as the
Yeah.
devil or Satan, right? Like there's so many layers of our faith that are and should be yes and no because somebody can come to somebody else and push their own yes or their own no when that's not a part of the faith journey.
I'd say this for me feels like the bridge into the other half of the question that we're confronted with in this episode, which is what's the point, right? Like,
Oof.
what's the point of all this? That question of evil is the one that like sparked like, oh, like that's the hard one, and that's also the like, are people evil? Are people inherently good, inherently evil? Am I supposed to forgive people? Sure. That sounds like an easy thing to say on the surface until something absolutely horrific happens directly to you in your real life and you are confronted with. Are you sure that's what I'm supposed like? Is that actually no? Like that it feels evil to forgive in that moment, right? I there are I don't want to make light of those like really heavy things that really happen in real people's lives and how just wrong it feels to forgive sometimes. For me, what's the point? I I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't sound insensitive. So let me start with this. I know some of those things that feel um, like definite no's, like definite that's I can't forgive that. I can't. I know some of those things. I've seen some of those things, and I think faith, capital F faith, like wide scope of faith. I think it all just keeps inviting me to love anyway, to give grace anyway, to forgive anyway, like to that. Yes, it's impossible. Yes, it's impossible. Yes,
Mm.
it's impossible, and I'm invited to anyway. And that is like the ultimate lifelong invitation that feels like one way to understand the journey that I'm on in faith. For me, it's less about choosing an identity and being a Christian and being fitting into a group or having an in crowd or having a team on my side. And it's far more about this invitation to do the impossible when it comes to love, do the impossible when it comes to peace and forgiveness and grace.
To do the impossible. What is the point? Man, I have been asked that question so many times of, yeah, what is the point of all this? And it's easy to answer this question when we are in, when you've just experienced the miracle, when you've witnessed the resurrection, like when you're standing in glory. What's the point?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so easy to respond to. What's the point when life gets hard? What's the point when you're faced with evil, and when you have experienced those unimaginable, gut-wrenching heartbreaks? It's so much more challenging to, and so I think, as I posed at the beginning of the podcast, it's so important to name that point so that you can be solidified in it, regardless if you're on the mountaintop or in the valley, regardless of what season of life that you're in, that you have here you go, that you have a truth of purpose, a truth of hope that you can hold on to, no matter what that season looks like.
Danny, recently, you preached a sermon that I got to see. And it included, a sermon was about lots of really insightful things, but it included a description of this Greek word that we've both seen before and we're familiar with, but it's this Greek word, hypogrammos or hippogramos, that I think I'll ask you to describe it, but I think means actually means, when you look at the Greek word, it's actually describing like tracing, like almost like a pattern that a child would trace to learn letters. Is that how you understand it?
Yeah, so it's I specifically pulled it from First Peter, and the use of the English translation there is example, but that word hippogramos is better translated as a child learning how to write for the first time, and tracing the same letter over and over and over again. And I think that's, when people phrase life sometimes as Groundhog Day, right? Because sometimes it does feel like you're tracing the same pattern. You're driving the same route to work. You're driving the same route to school drop off, to school pickup, to soccer practice, to it does feel like the same tracing. And we're invited to see the sacred, that the tracing might look different, that even though it is the same trace over and over, based on the situations we're given in life, based on the experiences, the tragedies, the grief, the joys, we are still tracing the same pattern. We are still tracing the same letter, but situationally it looks so different.
That's cool, man. I took that word and started to think about the patterns I've been tracing my whole life, really since childhood, out of fear, not because bad things happened to me as a kid, but because when we're little kids, we learn to be afraid of things, and when we are afraid of things, we respond in a certain way. And then the truth is, we have very few moments over the course of our life when we are actively trying to change those old patterns. And so a lot of us just end up, at my age, creeping up on 50 sometime soon, tracing the same patterns I've been tracing for decades and decades and decades. And these patterns of response, these patterns of the way I respond to the world. I will retrace patterns that get me applause. I will retrace patterns that keep me safe. I will retrace patterns that help me avoid conflict or help me feel good about myself, or that fill holes that I've had for years and years. And I've been just thinking about, maybe I feel like my own personal faith journey, especially over this last decade, has been about learning about and noticing a new pattern that was available to me. And then little by little trying it out and tracing it and not getting it right. And then being exhausted, being too busy to trace it.
Yeah.
And then coming back to it every once in a while and tracing that new pattern again and feeling what that pattern feels like. And knowing that I have an old pattern that is about fear and that is about scarcity and that is about protection and that is about maintaining who I used to be and that is about, right, like all of this old pattern. And then there's this other pattern available to me that, some might say looks like Christ, or might say, I would offer that there's this pattern shows up in every major religious tradition and all the great spiritual traditions. This pattern of abundance and this pattern of love and this pattern of embrace and this pattern of radical welcome and this pattern of deep forgiveness that knows no bounds and requires no justification. This different pattern over here. It's one thing to go to church and to hear a story about that pattern, to nod your head. It's another thing to read a book and to be like, oh, there's a little element of that pattern that I might try in my life. But over time, really trying to build a life around that different pattern and feeling how terribly hard that new pattern is. But also that pattern might be the pattern that that's been planted inside all of us and that's been planted inside our world that we just need to rediscover. It's not a new pattern. It's the pattern. It's the oldest one. It's the one made of love. And so I don't know, Danny, your sermon that included that word hupogrammos just really got me thinking about my answer to what is the point. And that to me lately has felt like the point. Teaching myself that new pattern. It's not about behavior. It's about being rooted, being connected to that pattern, to that old vine, to that deep truth that is unnameable and that is not, listed in clear, 10 steps to understand the truth. It's hard to understand. It's misty and it's ineffable and it's slippery, but man, when you're connected to it, that pattern feels so different.
First of all, it takes courage to even find a new pattern. I mean, especially at the age you're approaching, Matt. Like that.
Hey, watch it. Hey, we didn't.
I'm just kidding.
Hold on.
No, but I mean, in all honesty, we get so comfortable in our patterns. We get so, and you said that, patterns aren't necessarily behavior. No, but the pattern, the consequence of the pattern is your behavior too.
That's right.
So seriously, huge kudos. One, recognizing oh, I've been doing this pattern for decades. And does it work? Yes. But it's not maybe the one that I'm destined for. Maybe it's not the pattern that where my soul is actually soaring. And so then to have the courage, my God, especially to step out and be like, let me try something new. Let me try a different path. Let's try this on. What does my life look like when I trace this pattern? What do my behaviors become when I trace that pattern? Because it's so scary just to make that decision. It's one thing to acknowledge it and do nothing about it, but to acknowledge it and say, hey, actually, I bet there's a better way.
Yeah.
I bet there's something that's more aligned with who I'm meant to be in a different pattern than the one I'm following.
Yeah. I feel compelled to say out loud that this is not I'm not choosing this new pattern because my life, I was at rock bottom. Yeah. I feel like the story you hear about faith journey is often my life was at rock bottom. Everything, yeah. I was a horrible sinner. I was just in the worst place. And thank God I found this new pattern. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm actually offering this to I think the reason we as a society are collectively where we are, and most of us are pretty dissatisfied with where we are as a society. I think the reason is simply that we're all just slightly off pattern. I don't mean to say that we're all deep, dark, dirty sinners. That's not that. Actually, the opposite. I think we're all just slightly off pattern, and we can feel that dissonance from being off pattern. And the way to get back collectively back on pattern, sorry, there is no way except you choosing to reconnect with that pattern of truth that you know. And I mean, not to be overly betweeny here, but like, I think the only way we really do that is with each other. Like we are, I believe one of the reasons that the space between us is so sacred, why I say that, is because, Danny, when I'm talking to you, I get little glimpses from a different angle of that ultimate truth. And you get little glimpses from a different angle of that ultimate truth. And when we're really tuned into each other, those little glances bump into each other and spark something real that pushes us toward this pattern of love, this pattern of this ancient pattern, this eternal pattern. And anyway, I'm grateful for you bringing that word back into my life. I'm going to be obsessed with the idea of tracing that pattern here for a little while.
I see a Greek class in your future then, Matt, maybe.
You're not a very good fortune teller, Danny. You're not a very good fortune teller. You know, they have Google for Greek. You know that. You can just Google Greek.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And here's I won't say it out loud for the sake of my professor. I use my Greek often. I use my Greek every day.
That's good.
It's all Greek to me. That's so good though. Like the space between us. I really do. Like I love when you just throw it out into everyday conversations, because it really does come down to that. Like we could, as people of religion, choose to view the space between one another as an opportunity to save a soul, or it's an opportunity to feel something divine, an opportunity to align with something more true than our own finite agenda. And I feel that when I'm in seasons of lull in life, I find the most comfort typically in either planned community moments or unplanned community moments of noticing and awakening ourselves to, man, the interconnectedness. I always come back to, I mean, same thing as space between, but like that interconnectedness, that you're never alone, that we're all, on this journey together. It's not meant to be this individualistic, how far can I go? What can I get? But how can we be better together?
Yeah, I think that the pattern that I'm trying to trace more often in my life is a we pattern, not a me pattern. And I think that's simple and elementary, but also like fundamental to the heart, what I believe is the heart of Jesus's ministry. I believe it's the heart of the gospel message, is that it is about interconnectedness, Danny, to exactly what you said. It's about me doesn't get you where you want to go. Me gets you to individuals competing for resources on a limited planet. We changes the dynamic entirely, changes the conversation entirely, and shifts our way of being, not just way of thinking, our way of being, when we recognize and honor that interconnectedness. I think that's so real. Danny, I'm curious, if you were you mentioned the two young people who were just confirmed at church. Yeah. These teenagers, these are like 16, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old kids, like teenagers, right at the precipice of life in full. And I'm curious, if we were to ask them, what's the point? What do you think they would say? Or maybe asked a different way, if you were looking at them and trying to figure out what the point of all this was by looking at them, what truth would they unveil?
Mm-hmm. This is where I love teenagers. I know they would give me like the church response at first that they think I want to hear, right? I love teaching the confirmation class. Like they'd give me that one at first. I'm like, okay, let's go deeper. What do you mean by that? And I think it ultimately does come down to what I heard over and over again. And these students, we encouraged them to, write their own statement of faith. And anybody listening, I encourage everyone to write a statement of faith. And it's not something this is the ultimate truth of my life. You're like, this is something that I'm working on. This is the pattern I believe right now. And in a year from now, it'll look different. 10 years from now, it'll look different. Matt and I we'll look back on these podcast episodes in 10 years and we'll be like, oh my God, can you believe I said that?
Yeah.
Wow. And that's the point of faith, is that it's a constant evolving. It's a constant revelation. And so I think the students, they would come down to something, what I heard over and over of, you're never alone, right? That was like the constant like thread that was through our whole class of like, you're never alone. Like,
wow.
We feel so isolated. We feel so alone at times, and spiritually, soulfully, we're never alone. And collectively, we are never alone.
Whoa, Danny, what a perfect piece of wisdom from the young people to share here. And you used to be a young people too once, not anymore, I guess, but
I'm still a young one.
Man, you are never alone, Danny. How does that change our pattern? When we believe that, and when we believe part of our job is to remind other people that they're never alone, how does that change our daily pattern? Just that. You don't need any scripture. You don't need any characters. You don't need to know First Peter. You don't need to know Greek. You are never alone. Mm-hmm. And you get to invite other people to remember that too. And watch how that changes your pattern every day. Because when I think I'm alone, I'm so afraid. When I think I'm alone, I'm so protective. When I think I'm alone, I'm so angry. I'm so defensive. I'm so vengeful. When I think I'm alone, I'm all of those things. But when I know I'm not alone, dang, I don't know. That's heavy stuff, Danny. That's beautiful.
And I want to encourage, like, I do not believe in coincidence. I am not a person that anything is ever just a coincidence. I believe there are constant reminders, or if you want to call them signs or winks, or there's every single day, if you just open your eyes, awaken your soul to how much is around you. It's unbelievable. Even I think the other day I was it was with my kids, and it was a stressful day, but we went and got ice cream, because that's what you do after a stressful day. You go get ice cream. And we're paying for the ice cream, and I look in the rearview mirror behind me, and I know the two women behind me, right, getting ice cream too. And in my mind, I'm like, maybe they had a bad day. Maybe they, And so it's like you lean out the window, you say hello, pay for their ice cream, and drive on, reminding, like, we're never like that. For me, that was such a wink. That was such a, like, man, you're never alone. And in fact, maybe other people feel alone too, and they need you to stick your head out your car right now and remind them, hey, you're not alone. I like ice cream after stressful days, just like you. Cheers, friend.
I believe we heal a broken, lonely, disconnected world, a divided world, one sacred conversation at a time, Danny. One little wave out the window at the person behind you and remind them that they're not alone, because they reminded you that you're not alone. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the point. Thanks, teenagers in the confirmation class that Danny led, for bringing us home on this episode. You did great. You did great. Danny, let's make sure we share this episode with them. I want them to know they influenced us. Hey, this has been a fun series, Danny. I kind of want to keep recording more episodes. I don't know what they'll be about, but this has been a fun series of 10 giant questions. And we now have done 10 of them as promised. And I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good about it, Danny. I think we spoke truth.
That's a good way to put it. Now, the next series should be 10 bigger questions, right?
Okay,
Are
good.
you ready?
Good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, 10, the biggest question. It's going to be a whole. Thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate you so much. I mean, we genuinely, actively, really do every single day, real life. We appreciate that you are out there, that you listen. Yeah, but also that you're the kind of people who would be even interested in this conversation, which tells us that you're probably the kind of people who know your neighbors, who uh, who create moments of sacred human connection as often as possible, because you know that that's the pattern that leads us to a healed world. And I'm just so grateful there are people like you out there. You inspire us. Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matt.